Hello, I'm Rick, the Fat Man GM. I am your GM, your game master for the day. I have 40 years of experience. I began playing when I was 12 years old, and my experience runs from old Dungeons and Dragons through Star Wars and BattleTech, Shadowrun, and a slew of others. It's always been my philosophy that role-playing games and tabletop board games, gaming as a social medium is a great way for all walks of life to come together and enjoy camaraderie and exploring and stepping out of our comfort zone, if you will. So, this is your place at the table.
Alright, my friends, I'm assuming this thing's working, and short of going back and doing another test, this is Diplomacy from the Avalon Hill Game Company. I picked this thing up in the early 80s or mid 80s. The copyright on this particular version says 1976. This is a game of skill in which negotiation, rather than chance, guides destinies of international politics. Up to 7 players seek control of Europe. Strategy without dice. An exciting game of wits. Well, it's a lot like... It's more of a tabletop board game than anything related to a role-playing game. But it does have elements that of diplomacy, which is to go with the tabletop. So the tabletop gaming, wargaming side of it is not its primary function, if you will. It's a collaborative combination of your players negotiating among themselves and cutting deals and breaking deals and so on and so forth. So one of the sad things about this particular box set was, as I have the original rule book, or I took it out of here for some other purpose, probably wanting to bone up on some information in there I found potentially useful in a different game system, and I didn't get it back in the box, which I searched around looking for it without any great success. So I ended up having to go to the internet, of course, and find the rule set that goes with it, and then copied it, sent it, printed it out. But the rest of the game is pretty much intact, original. So we got the original box, which, you know, I only played it a few times, so it's obvious it didn't get a lot of mileage. You have 2 sets of tokens, and later versions have actual, they have artillery pieces to represent the army, which is what the star represents in the original version, to my knowledge. And the anchor, of course, is your navy. In the later versions, this would be a battleship. So you have enough number or colors and variants in here to host 7 players. Put that off to the side, out of the way. It comes with a really nice board. Like I said, it's a tabletop board game in a lot of aspects. So we have this pretty nice fold-out map of Europe, as you can see. All your primary locations and things like this. And then it has what they call a conference map. These were originally meant for use of... each player would get one, and you could make who's what movements, things like this on here. You could sketch on them. So obviously the intentions was that you would save one of these and go out and get Xerox copies of them, and that way you're not marking up stuff on your actual board. And I think this is one of my early Xerox copies. Back in those days, you used to go to various places. Sometimes your post office or bank. I would go to a local gas station that had a Xerox machine at 10 cents a copy, or I'd go to a local grocery store at 10 cents a copy. So here was a copied version. You could see we had played some stuff on this one, so this one got marked up a little bit. Then we had this cover for the basic diplomacy rule set for the book, and little instructions on it. Basically, diplomacy is basically a relatively simple game in principle, but complex in execution. Each piece has a power of 1 and can only move 1 space each move. There's no element of chance. The play of the game combines careful planning and chess as in chess, with skill in negotiating deals and persuading other players to go with your plan. Diplomacy may be played by any number from 4 to 7, although the rules will say 2 to 7. Game is best with 7 players, can be played well with less. The ultimate objective of the game is for one power to gain control over the majority of the board. Kind of like Risk in a lot of aspects. Risk would be a much simpler version of this without the diplomatic stuff. On connection with that, you could take the diplomacy rules and apply it to Risk if you chose, and make Risk an even more risky game. Moves are game are classed as 2 moves a year, beginning in the year 1902, with spring and fall moves. A game involving only 8 to 10 moves or 4 to 5 years makes a very good game. Will take as much as 3 hours for beginners. One of the reasons it's supposed to take so much is because you're going to devote a good chunk of your time kibitzing with your fellow players, negotiating with them, and cutting deals. And they have some ways of doing that. The rulebook appears ominous, blah, blah. You start the game by putting pieces of armies and navy on the board, outlining the beginning of the rulebook. The number of pieces that a player has on the board is determined by the number of supply centers he controls, etc., etc. Obviously, the more significant places, each one of these dots represent, the capital or a supply center. So for every one of these you have one of those game pieces, be it a army or a navy. Says occupancy of a supply center spring of the year does not mean you have control of the supply center. You must be the last force to occupy the supply center in the fall of any year. So if you take it at the beginning of you take a supply point in the middle of the year, you better hold it by the end of the year, and otherwise you don't gain any advantage. So you have to hold it for two rounds, and then on the second round you get to add another piece of another army or piece of navy, however you want to look at it. During the first year, it's important to plan to occupy as many of the supply centers in neutral countries as possible. It is important to make alliances with players so that you both do not go for the same supply center and waste your energies. If, in planning your moves, there are questions as to where a piece can go. Excuse me a minute. Yeah. As always, it's fairly early in the morning, and while I'm not a smoker, I sure do get those morning coughs. Let me get this yet. All right. After negotiations, each player privately writes down on paper the moves for all of his armies and navies. The orders are then read off. A unique feature of diplomacy is that every piece of every player moves at the same time. Therefore, all orders must be read out before it is clear where each piece will end up in the move. Only one piece can be in a space on the board at any one time. If 2 pieces are ordered into the same space, neither one moves unless it has support from another piece, thus a move can be wasted. Negotiations before each help move to avoid wasting the move in this manner. An army and navy may support the move of another army and navy of that country or any other country in making a move, provided it is adjacent to the space in which the move is being made. Support can also be on the defensive basis, protect a piece from being dislodged from a space it occupies. One space is support of another making the move, opposing pieces do not, then it moves into an empty space. Or it may force the unsupported piece to retreat out of space to support a move, etc., etc., etc. Basic and overview. So this is the PDF copy, if you will. I still have the original. Do a friend a favor. This registration card from your blank game is from how you get your mailing list, which means you'll get new product info before the general public does. Little questionnaire on how you felt the game worked out. So Rules of diplomacy. This, by the way, is how I like to handle PDFs when I do them. And whenever possible, I will staple them, print them. If I can get my printer to go print both sides on a single piece, it's even better. But in this case, it wasn't as easy, so I just went with it. And then they went back to back, so I took a little piece of tape in each corner to hold them together, stapled the border, and then ran pieces of tape down the border to help keep things on. So we got our map board, how to play, pretty much everything that was said in there. Shows how things move, understanding results, standoffs, short or support orders, simple support examples, convoy orders, cutting off support. Support cannot be convoyed. Rare cases and tricky situations such as self-dislodgement. So a country cannot dislodge or support the dislodgement of one of its own units, even if that dislodgement is unexpected. This is the one time which support is refused or negotiated when it would otherwise be legal. However, such orders can be written for other reasons, such as creating a standoff. The following are some examples to further explain this rule. So examples. Etc. And we got the order of resolution, retreat and disbanding phase, writing a crest, disbandment, gaining and losing units phase, adjusting the number of units, disbanding. It says here, if a country has fewer centers than units, it must disband the excess number of units, the owner's choice of which units. If a country has more supply centers than units, it can place new units in each unoccupied supply center of its home country and that it still controls. It cannot build units and supply centers outside of its home country. So, for example, the French player can only build units in Paris, Brest, or Marseille throughout the course of the game. However, Marseille was under Italy's control. The French player had to use a unit in Brest. He or she would only be allowed to build in Paris. So, ideally, you can't stack units. Alternate way to play, civil disorder, time management, opening moves in a sample game. And then we got how this stuff's supposed to play out the fall, the first year, second year, etc. An example. Rules to help you resolve orders. Abbreviations. So basically, the gist of this game system, what you're going to do is pick a country. So if I control Austria-Hungary, my borders are outlined here in bold, and this would be my opening country. And I have supplies. I have 1, 2, 3 supply centers, one in Budapest, one in Vienna, and one in Trieste. And I would have either 3 armies or 2 armies and a navy. And that would be my beginning pieces. Then I would look at, like, for example, Serbia down here. Well, let's see. You can't really get down here, but Serbia is down here, and it's an individual country that's considered neutral in the game. I would occupy this independent country and gain the only supply center, which would be the capital of Serbia. Then there's Bulgaria, Greece, Albania, which has no, it's just a territory. It doesn't have any control centers. Anyway, so at the beginning of the game, your players are going to try to negotiate deals between themselves. They're going to arrange treaties, decide if they want to work with each other to conquer the map, or to eliminate other players so that later they can go at it for each other. This can be short-term deals, long-term deals. Ideally, what the game suggests is that these players get up and go to another room and have their discussion, and to allot up to 30 minutes per discussion. This is one of the reasons why it could be only 7 or 10 moves to actually move around and conquer the map, but you're going to take 3 hours to play the game, because ideally most of the time is between each spring or summer move, you're going to have a negotiation. You're going to negotiate who's going to move into Serbia, and if you're going to allow your treaty partner to do it, are you going to support their actions so another player or another group of players don't intercede in that aspect? So there's a lot of that negotiating, but there's also that possibility that that's a farce, that the other player has negotiated a better deal with a different player, and at the time when it comes to do what they're going to do, they're going to stick you in the back, which creates its own sets of drama, and you can imagine how some of this can play out. The other thing about it is that before you make your moves, you're going to place those orders. You're going to create an order for your unit. Each unit has an order, whether it's stand in place or support something, support another unit that you're moving, or support an ally's unit, or move the unit to an occupying location. And in doing so, you write these down on slips of paper, and you don't show them to anybody until it's time to make the move. Then everybody does the same thing at one time. We're going to read off all of our orders. At this point, the moves are set in stone. You don't get to adjust them. You've already pre-decided what you're going to do after your negotiating phase, and then you're going to act on what your orders are. Now, there are some orders that are considered illegal, and so if your unit's unable to do what you wanted it to do because somebody's put a check and balance in place, or because somebody removed a territory that you were going to move into, they took it over, or another, then it becomes a static move. Then your piece just stays where it is, and it's unable to complete its mission. Or if it's considered an illegal move by the rules, then or turns into an illegal order, it also stands in place. So at that point, you're committed to making those options. And like in chess, if you're blocked, then you're blocked. Then you have to wait till the next turn, after negotiating, try to decide what you're going to do. And from that part, it's pretty simple. It's an interesting game, diplomacy is. And what it really needs, I never had an opportunity to play this with complete strangers, because if you're playing with friends, and I had three friends, and I played this game on a couple occasions, and it can be interesting, but it devolves into some he said, she said stuff, or it can end up with some hurt feelings. So you better have some good friends. So with strangers, I imagine playing this over the internet would be much more challenging, especially since you have many more ways of making a connection with other people, and makes that for like I said, a more interesting and challenging set of options. But there you have it, a very interesting, unique game. And there's several versions of this. They've come out with 3 or 4 variants over the years. I don't know that if there's an updated current version. I don't know if there's a digital version. But there you have it.